Friends, last week I treated this 1917 inspired diorama with a fine brush. In other words, I outlined every detail on the tank, added texture and definition to the groundwork, painted all the additional elements of the scene, and I even added chipping effects. The groundwork is now pretty much finished and waiting for some resin water, but before that happens, I need to finish the tank itself, so let's get to work, shall we? And let's continue where we previously left off, chipping effects. I always give them some additional treatment with enamel rust washes, but this time it's gonna be extra fun. Because, hey, this tank is abandoned, destroyed, KO'd. It might be sitting in that flooded shell crater for a few hours, or a few months, you never know, because the front lines in 1917 could remain the same for long periods of time. Well, obviously I want to take the opportunity to make it extra rusty. Not only it's a lot of fun, but I believe it helps to better portray the story. A destroyed tank that's been exposed to the elements and heavy rain for, some time. Most of the effect I'm doing here is the usual stuff I do on most of my models, but rust can be used to add some contrast as well. For example, if there are any tight spots or some shadowed places, a rusty gradient can be used to sort of emphasize that. Some tanks are more suitable for this than others, and a riveted WW1 tank made from individual panels is just the perfect subject. Shrapnel damage can be also enhanced, and here every effect works in conjunction. The shading around the hole, the concentrated chipping, and the rust effects. More variation can be always added using a lighter tone. I usually like to combine these when more corrosion is present. Another good example of this is the exhaust heat cover. I applied lots of chips in the previous episode, knowing I'd be covering them with some heavy rust. And when we're talking heavy, I mean some speckling effects on top of that. These are a quick way to add further texture and visual detail. Although the technique isn't very accurate, any misfired specks can easily be removed with white spirit. So there's that, an interesting textured exhaust cover, and a Rusty Mark IV. Although when you look at it from a normal viewing distance, the rust effects aren't so over the top anymore, are they? But we're not completely done with the Rustification ritual, because there's one more prominent detail needing some of our attention. The exhaust muffler is sitting right there on the top of the tank, so it's gonna be easily visible. So why not make it look interesting while giving it a completely different texture than the rest of the model? I'm again going for that weird base coat simulating heat-affected steel. This means some off-white, a bunch of blue gradients here and there, and of course a lot of wear using a dark brown rusty color. This detail is pretty huge, so to save some time I applied the rust tone in a wet fashion first, and then I used that as a guideline for hastily painted chips using a 000 paintbrush. This step would be a lot easier if the exhaust wasn't glued in place, and I could use an airbrush and some chipping medium, but even this isn't anything unbearable. And now I could cover it all with a heavy wash made from enamel rust. Actually the same tones I used on the rest of the tank, it's pretty straightforward. And whenever blending isn't enough, speckling will once again add more texture, but also opacity. So it's basically the same process, just with a different base coat, and that's what makes the exhaust look completely different than the remaining rust effects on the model. Now that we have the heavy corrosion out of the way, let's grab another enamel concoction. And it's gonna be this one. I haven't used it since the Type 5 Cheery, I think, so almost 3 years. But streaking effects are cool, my friends. I don't do them very often because I'm not very good at them, especially the blending part of the process. But here it felt like the best approach. Firstly, I knew I'd had to subvert everyone's expectations about heavy layers of mud running down the sides of the tank, because, well, take a look at the inspirational photo. I suspect the mud simply got washed down by rain. My point is, the tank is pretty clean. And secondly, what am I supposed to do if there's no mud? Like, leave the tank clean or whatever? Absolutely not. So, the best way to describe it, in my opinion, some random dirty streaking effects are the least assuming way to add some weathering without making it too obvious. Yeah, I guess that didn't make any sense. On the other hand, there are definitely parts that deserve every bit of heavy streaking, such as every mechanical component on this tank, the track tensioning mechanism and all the armored covers on the running gear. Here I went with my trusty oil paints, and truth be told, I find them much easier to blend than the enamel streaking effect. Next time I have this opportunity, I'm doing it all with oil paints. Oh, and let's not forget the flimsy cans. They were called flimsies for a reason after all. And the reason was, they leaked all over the place. I almost forgot to paint the asbestos tape around the exhaust pipe. I made it from thin strips of Tamiya tape, and to make the texture as pronounced as possible, I base coated it dark brown and then made the highlights using brown mixed with deck tan, and then the final layer was just pure deck tan. So that's the model with everything painted appropriately, and it's now ready for earth effects. World War I subjects are excellent for these, so although the tank is gonna stay relatively clean, I'm sure not gonna miss the opportunity. Starting with tracks, some quick texture was added with Wilder's Muddy Paste. Tracks are easy because they can be completely covered with dirt, and I can always get that hang of the technique there. I know that Wilder paints, including these textured mud effects, are out of production now, but this paste is still my favorite. Acrylic products from AK, specifically their Terrains range, are also amazing, but I only have the wet mud, which dries to a super glossy finish, and that's just not cool. But yeah, acrylic textured mud, it's primarily there to, provide some nice texture and volume. If it's applied in thicker layers, it takes much longer to dry, however, this can be used to our advantage. When it starts developing a dry crust, it can be attacked with a sharp object, and the otherwise boring clump of mud can be transformed into a properly crumbly pile of earth. Additionally, real dirt from my garden can be employed for the loose debris. This is one of my favorite weathering tricks because it makes any model more lifelike and less manicured, if that makes any sense. A bunch of straws from dried seagrass for good measure, and everything is fixed with VMS ballast freeze. Basically, I focused all of the dirt on top of the tank, because this is where it would collect from the moving tracks, and it would get blown here by explosions on the battlefield. Ballast freeze leaves a glossy residue when it dries, which is not cool, but this is quickly rectified by a coat of flat varnish, again from VMS. The model now has some proper texture, and don't get me wrong, because the earth looks pretty nice as it is, but the problem here is that it has to match the ground on the diorama, so I'll need to paint it using the same, or at least very similar techniques. Pre-dusting is a method I use all the time. It provides a good foundation for enamel or oil paint effects, but it also blends the real dirt with the model. Normally I use a light, dry earth tone, but because I post-shaded the groundwork, starting with a dark and working my way towards a light tone, I took a similar approach here as well. The dark, desaturated color is gonna stay around corners, crevices, and in the middle of large piles of dirt, while the lighter tone will act as a transition, so to say. Honestly, it doesn't work as well as on the groundwork. In fact, I don't think it works at all, but at least I tried to stay consistent. Because the result was too smooth and airbrushed, I had to get some help from enamels. This time from Ammo's Heavy Mud range. Although the paint is very thick, it can be diluted like any other into a wash-like consistency. My aim here was to give the earth effect a gritty, authentic look. And once again, there's no better technique for that than speckling. But even regular blending can give us that realistic muddled finish. Just a very little amount of paint here and there, some careful blending with white spirit, and the effect is gonna look much better. It's basically a quick adjustment layer, and once it was done, I could start with the more enjoyable stuff. After I superglued the tracks in their proper position, I gave them some careful rust treatment. If you ever want to communicate that the tank you're modeling hasn't been used for a while, and this applies to a functional tank as well, just avoid any polished metal on its tracks and instead use bright, fresh rust tones. It's an easy way to tell a story. It also looks authentic, but also, I think it looks pretty, as in aesthetically pleasing. Dust and mud are always fun when there's a combination of multiple tones working together. My traditional combination is a light dry tone and some darker damp tones, both made using enamels. But because I pinwashed the groundwork with oil paints, I needed and also kinda wanted to try to do the same on the tank. I've always been under the impression that oils blend too smoothly for authentic looking artifacts, but if they're blended over a layer of some gritty enamel dust, the results are, in fact, very nice. I'd say it's even easier than enamels, and most importantly, the weathering on the tank is now gonna match the colors on the ground. And yeah, the tank is finished and ready to be placed in the diorama. My friends, this video might not look like much, but it was honest work. But more importantly, I finished the tank, and that's very important because now I can glue it to the ground and pour resin water all around it. That's something I never tried earnestly, and I think I only worked with clear resin a couple of times when I was a teenager. And you know, it was just on a very small scale, as in 1 or 2 small puddles on a very simple muddy base. What I'm trying to say is that my experience with resin water is absolutely non-existent, zero. This fact makes me quite nervous, but also excited at the same time, so the next and I think final episode will be about that. Working with epoxy water, and while I'm waiting for each layer to dry, I'll paint a soldier figure and some of those, loose debris and junk that's gonna lay around and float in the water. If something with the resin goes south and I just ruin everything, at least I'll be able to make a funny video. Or at least I hope it will be funny. Anyway, thank you for watching, my friends. I hope you found this video helpful or at least interesting to watch, and I hope you'll join me again the next week. A special thank you goes to my patrons who make this show possible, and if you'd like more content from me and in return support this channel, my Patreon page is like a blog or a digital magazine full of additional content. I post there almost every day with updates from my workbench. That's basically like behind the scenes content. We can get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. You can watch 1 week early ad-free videos. So yeah, you could be watching the epoxy resin water right now. I'm also posting these beautiful studio photos in full resolution. These are downloadable, and you could also download some small 3D models for your printing pleasure, made by yours truly and some of my patrons. And last but not least, real-life inspirations and references for dioramas, buildings, and sceneries. Okay, my friends, I can already hear the epoxy calling my name, so I better go and give it some attention. Yeah, wish me luck, because this is gonna be the step that'll either make or break the entire diorama. But honestly, I'm not too concerned. Whatever happens, happens. And you, until the next one, stay safe, stay awesome, keep building those models, don't just collect them, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!